Developments are day to day in Paris, but we got long-term decisions to make here in America. Welcome into My State of Mind. I am Dan York. It is an honor and a pleasure to have you aboard on this Wednesday evening. All sorts of details in terms of, the prosecutors' reports in Paris and hundreds of people who've been sought and detained as we speak. But there's a bigger picture here, and that is things like refugees and terrorism and America and Donald Trump asking if the president's insane and all that kind of stuff. And tonight I have Timothy Edgar, who is the first and former Director of Privacy and Civil Liberties for the Obama administration. He's teaching at Brown, and that's a terrific resource at Brown, as you know. And I'm looking forward to having a conversation with him actually in our first segment here. But as you know, I like to kind of pick on some of the things that are happening in our own backyard as well, because when things are happening all over the world, we tend to forget about what's going on in our own backyard. So let me just kind of check into the rundown and offer a couple of thoughts. Like, what? Did you see these numbers? Could you show the headline, please? This. Okay, I'll go with that one. That's. Whew. Here's the story on the kids in the testing.
The first year of the PARCC exam will be a baseline point measuring students' growth and education, and as a whole, the bar has been set low. 36% of students in the state reached expectations in English, 25% in math. Jeremy Chapetta is the executive director of Blackstone Valley Prep.
I don't know that you can really teach to this test.
Here's a PARCC exam sample question from the 6th grade literacy section. It deals with the passage from the book Boy's Life. Part A of the question is what the word unencumbered means, a word found in the passage. The idea is the students should be able to correctly infer the word's meaning without knowing the exact definition. The second question asks for an example to support their first answer. On the day Rhode Island's PARCC results were released, over in Massachusetts, where their education system has been considered one of the best in the country, their education board voted to make a new test for their students, combining MCAS and PARCC. It's being called MCAS 2.0.
Sorry for that little, that was not in your television, that was on our side. The numbers are horrifying. And so now we're going to find out whether it's a legitimate test or not. Of course, those who did okay will say, hey, it's a pretty legitimate test. We got a long way to go. And those who were in the dumper will tell you that this test doesn't make any sense at all. The kids never knew what the material was. And by the way, the answer is not burdened. I only caught that on the fly, but not burdened. I always listen to these folks who say, you know what, even a fat old guy like you, if you took a test like this, you wouldn't know what to, not burdened. That's what. Roll your DVR back and you'll see what I'm talking about. The Rhode Island average, again, 36 and 25%. We have that on a little piece of paper here for you. And then I looked at my own home high school, and after I, took a deep breath and grabbed myself a shot and a beer, I thought, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Are you kidding me? We just won, I feel like the town is we just won the National Principal of the Year Award, and here he was only a couple of weeks ago.
As we move to the more difficult things around whether it's higher expectations around academics and our standards-based grading system, and pushing kids to challenge themselves with more rigorous college-level courses, those are the harder things. And but we had a lot of wins there in changing our school culture, making it safe, making it a positive place to be. And very honestly, kids want that structure.
Also talked about high bars for performance. Now, Alan Tenrero gets a pass so far because the jury's out. I don't know what happened here. But he's got to come back and explain why the high school stunk. What every one of us who pays taxes and who are parents are wondering, what is this juxtaposition between high awards for educators, great reputations for a school, and this kind of a number? It doesn't make any sense. And there are some significantly good numbers in the school performance list. If you take a look at the Journal and the WPR.com website, you can see that there are some schools that did pretty well. We need answers and some clear message as to whether this testing is legitimate and why. I got people writing to me on email from the radio show, weekdays noon to 3 on WPRO, who suggested the kids tanked the test because they were mad they had to take it. Okay, we'll look into it. begging now. We're begging. The House Oversight Committee is begging. Here's the headline that has got some people sort of talking, but not really, because he ain't coming. Eyewitness News has the story.
After he turned down an invite, Curt Schilling might be subpoenaed. The House Oversight Committee is holding a new round of hearings digging into the 38 Studios debacle. And a spokesperson for the House Speaker, Nicholas Mattiello, says the committee is planning to vote Thursday to ask the Speaker to subpoena Schilling, the founder of the failed video game company. Schilling was previously invited to testify, but in this letter dated on the 11th, his attorney turned it down because of ongoing litigation between Schilling and the state. The Speaker was unavailable to talk with me on camera, but his spokesperson said should the committee vote to approve such a request, the Speaker will grant it. I reached out to Schilling on Twitter to get his reaction into potentially being subpoenaed. He tweeted me back, bringing up the former governor, Lincoln Chafee, saying, once Chafee's charade of litigation goes to the dump, no, not one issue with it. Everyone deserves to hear the truth finally. The Speaker has subpoena power, but his spokesman told us if one is issued here, it would be the first time it's happened since the law was passed to give him that power in 1983.
It's so nice to see that we're doing business on Twitter. News people talking to Curt Schilling on Twitter. Good package. This is a joke. This House Oversight Committee process is a flaming joke. The chairperson, Karen Macbeth, is trying to hold on to some legitimacy. She was here last week.
There's the big push out there for the independent investigation, and I said go ahead, but I'm not in charge of that, and that's up to our governor if she chooses to do that. And if she's not, I have to continue just doing what I can do.
Yeah, the House Speaker is holding her reins. The governor is hiding behind the state police independent investigation. And we're holding on to the idea that maybe Curt Schilling will come for an interview. There should be hundreds of subpoenas issued on that particular saga. Do I need to go into that speech again? Please come, Curt. Please come. You got to be kidding me. All right. We have a refugee debate going on in America right now, and the president's been pretty animated about the refugee part, not necessarily about the response to the terror part, and maybe that's why people are upset with him. I guess we'll certainly have some thoughts on that, I am quite certain. Here's the latest headline on what's happening with the local reaction to all of this. Yeah, and then you get folks like this at WPRI.com. This senator is beautiful. Elaine Morgan, she's been here before. Amongst the things she writes is that the Muslim religion and philosophy is to murder, rape, and decapitate anyone who's a non-Muslim. Oh, it was a typo. She said, oh, I didn't mean to send that out. I just bought a new smartphone, but I meant to write fanatical Muslim religion and philosophy. You know, when we have our less than rocket scientists, local legislators opining on this particular matter and rallying at the State House like they are tomorrow, you know we're in trouble. Now look, there are different points of view from the governors across the country as to whether we should be taking in refugees. Charlie Baker in Massachusetts has this thought.
I'm not interested in accepting refugees from Syria. I would need to know a lot more than I know now before I would agree to do anything.
And our Rhode Island governor has this thought.
What I've said and what I stand by is we'll take our lead from the president and the federal government. All of this depends on the details, and we can't let ourselves get caught up in the politics or any hysteria. You know, we'll look at it when it comes, and I'm not going to weigh in on hypothetical decisions because it's just too important.
And so we've got, you know, at least two responsible points of view, however different it seems. And here's the latest from CBS on what's going on now.
I've also welcomed Moscow going after ISIL.
Just days after Russia launched its first significant strikes against ISIS, President Obama extended an offer.
If we get a better understanding with Russia about the process for bringing an end to the Syrian civil war, that obviously opens up more opportunities for coordination with respect to ISIL.
Timothy Edgar is the former director of privacy and civil liberties at the Obama administration, teaching at Brown. Welcome.
Hi.
Nice to have you. Honored to have you. Give me your executive summary on all that's happened in the last week, and then we're going to dig into some of your field of expertise.
Well, it feels a lot like 9/11 again, with the focus obviously being in Europe. And I think that what we need to do is to try to learn the lessons of these attacks, figure out why they weren't prevented, what intelligence failures took place, and what can we do to make sure that they never happen again. That's going to be a big issue that's going to occupy certainly all the European countries, and especially France, but all over Europe and the United States for many months, probably years to come. And we need to take it very seriously in order to deal with this problem. It's a massive problem, and I think that we need to express our sympathies to the victims of those attacks.
When we come back, his field of expertise is provocative. Stay with us.
I think it makes it even more incumbent on the security and intelligence professionals to make sure that we are able to look at individuals who are coming into this country with an eye toward what it is that we might know about individuals, or ways that terrorist organizations might try to secret people into these networks and into these refugee flows.
Okay, so the refugee conversation obviously has everybody's attention right now, and it's become a soundbite war in a lot of ways, and I think that's unfortunate, to be honest with you. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yes, certainly. I think that this is a complex question about security. Border security is an important and hard question. How do we stop people that we know are associated with terrorist groups from getting in the country? I think the focus on refugees is all wrong. Refugees get some of the most significant screening of any category of people that come into the country. We have people coming in from the EU, from Europe, on visa waiver program. That was most of the attackers in France. They get relatively cursory checks. We have possibilities of homegrown radicals. Refugees are the least likely place in which a terrorist group would try to send an operative.
Should we be more worried about visa waiver programs than we are about refugees?
Yes, I think that what we need to do is to heighten our border security, and that means ensuring that our intelligence agencies are connecting the dots. Same thing we were doing after 9/11. And we should work with our European partners to make sure that their intelligence services are feeding us the information we need and are sharing intelligence. That's why I've called for something like a 9/11 commission. It would be based in Europe, a European version of it. We would help them. And it would have to be international. It'd have to cross many different borders. That's the challenge today.
It's got to have a very high-tech aspect to it, and that's really your wheelhouse, right?
Yes.
What bothers me over the last weekend in watching this as a consumer of news, never mind somebody who's supposed to try to help get some answers, is this notion that even Silicon Valley has added into kind of an encryption asset for terrorists that we seem to be at a loss to be able to track and follow, that these guys, translated, are talking to each other and we can't follow the conversation. This is your thing.
That's right. It's a difficult problem because in order to ensure cybersecurity, you need to have strong encryption. You need to have the internet much more locked down than it has been in the past. So the question is, how do you ensure law enforcement can still get the information they need to do their job to keep us safe? And that's not an easy answer to that question. That's one other reason why I think we really need to have the facts. Putting backdoors in encrypted communication sounds appealing, but it has all sorts of repercussions.
What does that mean?
A backdoor would be the idea that when you encrypt something, government should have a key that allows them to unlock it. And the problem with that is if you give one government the key, there's no guarantee that every other government's gonna want that key. Hackers could get that key. It makes the whole system much less secure. It would be wonderful if you could have secure communications and still have access for law enforcement and intelligence, but it's difficult to do that and actually have secure communications.
I wonder, polling is always difficult, but if I had 10 people, I got some Brown students watching the show today, if I'd ask them, and I will after the class, how many would give up a significant amount of their privacy in order to be guaranteed, no guarantees, but elevate the possibility of protection, and to know that anything that you type or say on a cell phone or might just be reviewed? Where is America on that? Where's the free world on that?
we're sort of in a golden age of surveillance. We have an enormous amount of data that governments can look at. That's what Snowden revelations were all about. Right. And my view is that we need sensible rules for surveillance, that we need checks and balances for surveillance.
What's the sensible rule? By the way, you a Snowden guy, yes or no? Are you thumbs up or thumbs down on him?
I'm a little in the middle, although more of a thumbs down, because I think what he did was pretty reckless in revealing a lot of important programs. He
could
did
have done less
debate.
to make the point, right?
I believe so. I believe that he just dumped all of this out there to say, you know, let's start a debate on privacy. That was good, but you know, he had said, I'm going to keep these things secret, and some of those details were really very damaging to our national security.
So when we're told that these particular terrorists who pulled this awful, heinous, barbaric crime this past weekend most likely were able to talk to each other in a cyber network or some technological space that authorities couldn't trace or follow, and that maybe this technology is coming even from the United States. I mean, how good is it?
Yeah.
And it really?
Well,
I mean,
we don't know that. I mean, this is my point. We've been hearing conflicting reports. You know, right after the attacks, there were reports, oh yeah, they were using encryption, that's why they weren't caught. Then I've seen today, oh, they were sending unencrypted text messages to each other. The fact is that we have a lot of teams of terrorists that coordinated this attack in Paris. Obviously, they had to communicate in some fashion. We don't know how they communicated. We don't know who was being tracked and who wasn't. We don't know what dots were connected or weren't connected and why. That's why we need to get those facts. It would be a terrible disaster if we would go out and make a massive change to our privacy rules, either direction really, without understanding what really happened. And that's, you know, the impetus for governments everywhere is always to do something, to show that they care. Well, the thing that they should really be doing is looking at themselves and what did they do wrong.
On that thought, great segue. When we come back, we'll talk about the president, because frankly, he looked like he was giving us a status report the other day, and it didn't move anybody. Stay with us.
They have taken advantage of the freedoms and liberties that we are so proud of in much of the world. And they also have taken full advantage of social media, using that as an environment to indoctrinate, to communicate, brainwash, direct, guide, train, and also presenting I think a very misleading narrative and impression of what is going on inside of Iraq and Syria.
The CIA director, Tim, I got to tell you, this social media thing has got to be our worst, well, in some ways can be our best asset and worst liability.
Yeah. Look, Brennan was spot on about the way that ISIL uses social media. They're extremely sophisticated when it comes to those tools. This is the point we were talking about earlier with the refugees. They don't need to use refugees that get enormous scrutiny. They use people all over, connected all over Western Europe, possibly in the United States. We have less of a problem than Western Europe does. And it's scary, and we need to do more to combat it.
So you were you are the former and first ever Director of Privacy and Civil Liberties for the White House.
Yes.
Give me 15 seconds on what that means, because I got a bunch of questions about it.
Our job was to look at privacy and civil liberties, especially as it related to our cybersecurity initiatives. How do we make sure not only that we protect privacy and civil liberties, but that we don't allow our search for security, whether it's cybersecurity or homeland security, impact important values that we have. And how do we avoid this false narrative that there's a choice? Because we found that effective security policies, whether in the cyber world or whether in terrorism or other areas, often had no impact on privacy and civil liberties. And the least effective ones often were the ones that had the greatest impact. It's easy if it's not effective, don't do it.
So you're kind of a combo high-tech and wonky guy.
I guess.
Right?
I guess that's right.
So let me ask you to wonk a little bit and talk about the politics of this.
Sure.
Are you an Obama loyalist? We all ought to be at a certain level.
Well, I was a civil servant in the White House, and I'd also served in the George W. Bush administration. But I think this president has, on the whole, done a very good job in terms of counterterrorism and many of his initiatives. I do think that in the past week, I've been worried about the tone that he has set.
Thank you.
Not being strong enough when it comes to standing with France and condemning these attacks.
Monday it looked like he was having a bad day.
It was not his best day as a communicator.
Setback is a very, very powerful word in that context, don't you think?
I think that the problem was he was being more of a pundit or a professor, you know, an academic than a leader. And I understand the frustration that he has with bad policy suggestions, you know, on refugees. On, hey, let's just bomb everybody. That's a bad idea. Let's send ground troops. And that's a very bad idea.
Who's ground troops? Isn't necessarily right? Come on now.
Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that he let his frustration with what he felt were bad policy ideas get to him too much.
I think you're right, and I think unfortunately, rhetorical tone, is actually very important during these times. You've got the President of France talking about being at war, and we've got a setback from the President of our United States, and the two don't necessarily match up. Now, I don't know how much you want to engage in the big picture in 2.5 minutes worth of time that we have left. I'd love to have you back in on the radio to talk more about this, but we have the most confusing, multi-directional, multi-party conflict maybe in world history going on in Syria right now. Do you agree?
Absolutely. It's a complete mess, obviously, and there are no easy answers, and that's what the frustration I think the President was trying to express. I think it got to the better of him in the sense that this was not a seminar to talk about the conflict. This was a time to express our solidarity with the people of France and our desire to go after and defeat ISIL.
But many would suggest that, in addition to the rhetoric, that there's a void that needs to be filled here by a more full-court press on ISIS. They may have picked the wrong fight with Russia. You know, a soda can reportedly a soda can in an airplane, you know, blew it up, and Putin's now got his full attention. And now that France had its episode, now maybe he's not feigning attacks on ISIS and actually participating in them. And so, but there needs to be a unilateral, multi-nation Arab involvement in boots on the ground somehow, because these guys have now taken territory. They're not Al-Qaeda, right? They've taken territory.
These guys are very much like Al-Qaeda, but worse. They have a safe haven. One of the lessons of 9/11 was no safe havens. So when it comes to use of military force, don't get me wrong, I think we should be using military force. I think that we should be having a debate about that in Congress and authorizing the use of military force in Syria to go after ISIL. And instead, up until now at least, Congress and the President have kind of ducked those questions.
You bullish on our safety or not?
Well, I'm worried. I think that we've done an enormous amount since 9/11 to keep ourselves safer. I think that we're in a much better position than Western Europe is. But to say that it couldn't happen here would be an overstatement. There could be a terrorist attack that we aren't able to prevent, and that's just a fact of kind of the new normal.
Not necessarily refugee-driven, however.
Almost, I think that is one of the least likely scenarios. I think it is far more likely that something like what happened in Paris would happen. That is, some folks from outside, a few radicals from inside, carrying passports and traveling as business visitors without much scrutiny.
Appreciate your expertise and perspective. We'll have you back. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Well, final word and we can back. Stay with us. He's all done. He's going to play a year, so we'll have. That's what we do now. Here's the headline. Okay. What's this, Derek Jeter all over again? I don't know, Big Papi, if he's going to get the same kind of swan that Derek Jeter got. And I don't know if he's going to the Hall of Fame. There was that little investigation about what he's inserted into his system, but we'll see. Maybe that's just a Yankee fan's perspective on all of this. We'll see you on the radio tomorrow at noon on WPRO and back here tomorrow night. Thanks for watching.